That was a great first half. Great open mic, everyone. I'm excited to introduce our set of featured readers for the night. So first up, we have our lovely poetic opener, Susan Brady. Susan Brady lives and writes in Victoria. Her poetry has appeared in literary journals such as the Antigonish Review, Art Poetry Magazine, CB2, Literary Review of Canada, The New Quarterly, Prairie Fire, and Room. Her poem Traces was shortlisted for Arts Poem of the Year and was selected as Reader's Choice. And we love Susan's poetry from our open mic, and I'm very excited to have her up here as a poetic opener. Come on up, Susan.
The spritz. Thank you. Can you hear me all right then?
Yeah.
Good. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. Thank you to Planet Earth Poetry for inviting me. And it's an honor to be the poetic opener for Reneé. I'm glad to be here with you. And I had a look a little bit at Bramah and the Beggar Boy, and it sounds mesmerizing. The poems I'm going to be reading this evening explore the elusive, that inexplicable thing that can't be named. But we can describe the space around it, Stephen Dobbins argues. We can chart its outline. We can imagine its footprints. My first poem is called The Hired Man, inspired by my young years in a rural setting. Beside the thick steers, his body looked wasted. Breath clouds hung in fetid air. Alone in the bottom of the barn, he scraped muck from the pen. Hoof and boot sunk in sullied straw, ankles pushing through treacle. I watched him climb to the loft, the ladder's spine firm in his grip. I followed, soft-shoed, giddy in the dome of the mow. The clean straw like the inverted bowl of the chalice. Shoot to the steer's pen a shaft of light. I held on to the ladder's highest rung. Straw gleamed in the hired man's arms. He moved to the chute, let go his load, leaned into the swirl of gold, and was gone. I crept to the brink. He wasn't there, maimed or whole. Only the cattle who stood together, belly to belly. I climbed down. He wasn't there. I looked the cattle in the eyes, dark glass. Bits of yellow clung to their sides. In the air above our heads, dust motes swirled. Sometimes when we're writing or reading poems, they startle. They tilt our idea of what is real or not real. This poem is called Threshold. A flash screeched metal. A car skewed in the street next to the coffee shop where we seek respite from the office. The car now hangs dark in the air outside our window, like a spaceship in Star Trek. The driver, alone in her fatigue green four-door Stratus, does not move as her car flies. Her eyes large, fixed, her face illegible. And I am motionless, outside the lattice of time. As I was that day on my uncle's farm when I climbed a fence, ripped its highest wire, electric. My hands, my whole being, seized with low current, I could not let go. I could have poured myself, effervescent, atomized, into a free-form universe. At last I leapt from my table. I grasped the realities of velocity, mass, impact. The car smashes into the shop, stopped only by the stubble wall under the window. We huddle in a safe corner. A man behind us grasps my husband's shoulder. We pick our way over glass shards, spent lightning bolts, collect our belongings, paltry things. Indifferent regulars approach the counter, coffees. On the sidewalk, a passing nurse, like an extra on a set, helps the driver out of her car. She looks intact, like any young woman on the street. And as if we're at a dress rehearsal, someone is sweeping, broom bristles skimming the tops of our shoes. Sometimes in poems, we find ourselves surprised by something breathtaking, transformative, a kind of fleeting miracle. At a poetry retreat in Newfoundland, the mentor gave us each a walk native to the area and challenged us to write about it. Here is the poem that surprised me. It's called Not Far from Grossmorn Park. Not far from Grossmorn Park, I come upon a rock, broken, strange, one side cracked black, mixed with rust red and cream. The other rippled crystal, backlit green, as if shed from a distant planet. Peridotite, Earth's mantle. Mammoth curtain wall between surface and core, that molten heart. Conductor of rising magma and cooling stone, tectonic drag and volcanic flare. Forge of common iron and olivine gem. It lines ragged rifts in the deep sea floor, until the ocean crust in a wild heave thrusts above the continental plate instead of sliding below. Mantle bursts into the air for the first time. Its green glimmers of primal sea for a geological breath. Before weather crackles the rock into dull serpentine. I hold the scrap in front of me. Fire, earth, water, jewel. Blood blush rising in my hands. In my last poem, I want to look at the miraculous agility of the imagination. This happens when we're not thinking hard, but rather listening. As Jane Hirschfeld says, it happens when consciousness is dipped into the liminal. So a friend challenged me to include 5 words in a poem, and she supplied the words. They were bioswale, synapse, cardigan, thistle, and grapple. I did grapple, but my imagination was doing twists quietly behind the scenes and gave me a hand. This poem is called A Woman Leaps. The day after he left, she ran her tongue along her teeth, expected a gap. She dreamed she flung a grapple to the far side of the gorge. It clawed the air, dropped over a mile into the rift. A week after he left, she stopped wearing his mustard cardigan, the one he couldn't stretch over his waist. She tore out the milk thistle he'd grown for his prostate, shot each prickled stalk at the compost heap, didn't miss. A month after he left, she built a gravel bioswale across the yard. After 5 rains, the lawn leapt, free of toxins. After that, she became a synapse firing, flying sovereign over the cleft.
Thank you, Susan. Wow. So many lines in there. I love the geologic breath. Okay, where did I put my thing? Here it is. Oh goodness. Okay, so I'm very excited now to introduce Renée Sarojini Saklikar. Renée is the author of 4 award-winning books, including Children of Air India and Listening to the Bees. Her newest book is Bramah and the Beggar Boy, an epic fantasy in verse from Nightwood Editions. She was the first poet laureate at the City of Surrey from 2015 to 2018, and I always like to do a little research, so I found this. I found this quote in an interview on the Ottawa Poetry Blogspot page, and Renée said about sound in poetry, which I think is so important to a live reading. The question of sonics really interests me. So much of my creative process and the way that poems arise for me is about sound. And I am but a kind of scribe taking dictation for the sounds that are tapping out their message and rhythms, waiting for me to stop whatever else I'm doing and just be still enough to try and capture what I'm hearing. So there's this sensation of continuing sonic boom, echo, chant, thread pulling me along. I've had to learn to listen carefully and slowly. That's part of what's taken me so long. Sometimes I've not quite known what I'm hearing, and I've had to walk and reflect and hold the sounds within me. So I love that. And I'm really excited to hear those sounds now coming to us live. So please welcome Renée.
Thank you. Oh, we're all spritzed. And do you mind being my techie?
Sure. Oh, yes, for the.
I'll let you I'll stand there and you can see where it needs
I will
to be.
adjust.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Daniel, when he was hosting, he would just judge someone's height and then naturally have it like up at the right height. But I do not have that skill.
Yeah, me neither. There we go. I'll just let you move your.
Oh, yes.
And I'll take off my mask.
That's okay. That for height.
Let's see.
Sort of unmasked.
How does it sound? Can you hear me? Should I be a little, maybe just a little? And hello, people on Zoom.
You got a record Zoom. We've never had that many people on Zoom.
Oh,
you got a following. I think that's probably pretty good.
Well, be amazing to be here. Dear Planet Earth Poetry, dear Russell Books, dear featured local poet, dear poets of the open mic, dear friends, thank you. It's an incredible honor to be here. It's been a night of poetry, and I promise you I'm not going to read all 300 and plus pages of this epic fantasy in verse, Bramah and the Beggar Boy. I've selected 11 poems, and I won't even read all of them. I just tend to go with the sonic moment. But I'll give you a little taste of it, and then maybe there'll be some questions and discussion, and who knows where the night will take us. All right. One afternoon, in an old house, in an abandoned village, on the outskirts of Perimeter, in the place they call Pacifica, Bramah and the Beggar Boy find fragments of an ancient text in an oak box. Hunched over scraps of parchment and broken computer disks, they blow the dust off a cover, and so our story begins. So welcome to the world of this epic fantasy in verse, and this is book 1. There are several books planned. We'll see if fate and life and everything else will permit me to complete. May it be so. This is a world governed by not just climate change, but accelerated climate change, global inequality. There's a pandemic, and there's a series of eco-catastrophes. And there's an all-powerful consortium, a mega industrial, agro-industrial complex, and it is evil in the sum of its totality, if not all its working parts. Shape-shifting in and out of it is the nimble Bramah. She's a locksmith. She's like a Robin Hood. And she's a working woman. She's a craftswoman, a woman of few words. She's brown, brave, and beautiful. And she has a penchant for rescuing orphans. She joins with seed savers, and they time travel, trying to save a planet ravaged by all these changes. The letter they find: dear future survivors, our only defense against gas, frayed scarves, no mistaking the color of our skin. We would search October and April, then we would find no traces of doors or gates, or doors only where locks turned, then jammed, eyes scanned for re-entry or bribes or bodies. We are sending you this message in case, although you are 3 light years away. We found these fragments, in an old oak box. It's a strange one. No matter how often emptied, something always at the bottom. No matter how ill-treated, no scuff marks mar this plain, smooth lid. Opened to this letter, see, the writings almost disappeared. Overheard about Bramah. Small, wiry, brown-skinned, yet British, sly too, quick, skilled with a lock and key, long black hair, braids touching her leather pack-sack, tools plus lasers, all the latest gadgets for openings, no lock that ever met her hands too tough or sticky. 1,000 scrapes, she dodged them all. One soldier from the before time even called her Kalo. No one ever knew why, just laughed. She collected nicknames, light year to portal, then the hard ones, April or June, the worst. In the nick of time, a turner of bad odds, her body on the line of any fire, her cheeks scarred, smooth skin though, and the softest lips. Tattoo on her arm, Ishmael Joe, and laughed. Auntie Agatha remembers the year 2020 and the good doctor. The year you were born, cotton, tomatoes blocked at the border, all the planes shut down. That guard on the ferry followed me home. Come here asking a lot of questions. I told him about all our masks, handmade. I baked him a pie, apples laced with jam. Face to face, I laughed, flowers sprinkling my board, them hospitals full, them gurney beds gone. His eye on my lips, mirrored and soft smooth. I stirred him a drink, mint and nightshade mixed. Them fires blew south, east, north, smoke drifting, him leaning against the sink, his gaze on mine. Then I took him out to the wishing well, his laughter unsure, his gun there to dwell. The good doctor, witness to the fate of children. I refused to stop posting health records, premature babies, their third eye bulging. Consortium banned all clinical trials. One by one, the beggar children lined up. They thought cooperation meant hot meals. Trembling, blood spattered, I wrote out their words. My eyes filled with tears. That was the moment, I told them later. They looked up and smiled. They called me shadow walker, my hair plated with smoke, ash biscuits on my tongue, dissolving grief. Left to die in the middle of the road. This they repeated just under their breath. Who will come for us? The children asked me. My gaze steady, I told them, only death. Resistor statements pinned to sideboard number 6. Third attempt. Connection intermittent. A millionth of the cell's volume spiked. Circ. We thought this won't happen to us, and then our bones irradiated light, sparse, cold, almost transparent. We drifted across sector turnstiles, those no-go zones. We paused at the gate called destruction. We found fluttering in the wind scraps of paper. Scientists on the run. We hid our data in abandoned shacks. First, we measured for bees, then they died out. Then we collected rain, droplets burning our skin. No snow on the mountains, bridges torn down. The shelter where sat the wind bit sharp, a crook joint of land. Outside rows of, there huddled a heifer, her calf, ruffled brown hide pressed close, a young goat, a fawn, 3 hybrid gazelles. We'd not last long past fire, the things lost like this. Battle song of the streets. Consortium banned us and we whispered, the city, our essence, cacophony, pitched battles, informers and miscreants. Our footsteps crushed wild time, boots cracked cement, ropes to scale upwards those high halls. We wanted to be counted, yet deplored repetition. Stick-to-stick beatings, blood. Children as young as 10 years old coughed, screamed. Freedom fighter, terrorist, who's right, wrong, IED, baby, your bombs, our arms, boom. When they came for us, our bruised hands held pass cards once coveted, vax checked at the door, once accepted at the steps of public buildings where scores of protests put down many generations. Outside perimeter, walls, bridges, beggar boys, sword girls too, battling guards of the 5th gate. There came a time when soldiers rode with their guns. By then, everyone yelling the same words, IED, baby, your bombs, our arms, boom. And then those children crying, masks ripped, torn. Freedom fighter, terrorist, who's right, wrong? We just want to eat, been so long. From the medical records of Bramah in the year 2050, as found under the bridge. Young girl, her name forgotten. No one calls her, she is never spoken to. Small build, dexterous, black hair, eyes slanted at their corners. She never laughs, head bent most times. She builds things. She calls them finds, her teeth, bones, unexamined. Afternoon, the heat, the drought, dust, that acrid curtain. Wind whips red and finds places inside culverts where no streams. Fingers fast into hoarded, stolen, saved. Her 6-wheeled machine, scrapped aluminum, prized at the gate where once Safeway, the Battle of Kingsway, a song. Fireside, she calls her toy. No one around, curious enough to ask. Unnamed, without words, her fingers tap, pause, tap, dot, dash. Long miles away, further down the coast, at Consortium Lab, KTS, the designers study data, fascinated, curious, and excited, all their codes. Bramah tells the beggar boy she must leave. Oak and throw down split acorns. The beggar boy runs to catch and hold catalpa, pendulous green overhangs. The beggar boy trips and falls, gets up again, cedar, scent, remembering, forgetting, scent. The beggar boy, panting, rubs his ankle, elderberry and cordial, goblets of fire. Bramah's aim is true. Down the guards and up they go. Linden, that long avenue shaded, on horseback and in tanks, unrelenting. Laurel, that time of the hero's return. Bramah binds and carries and finds the spot. Bramah wipes away blood from her shoulder, oak and cedar. The beggar boy fights back tears. Bramah tells the boy, find your name, son. Midnight, years later, eons forward, you'll run tundra, you will fall to your knees still. Get up, run to the gate of the winter portal. Find the boys who sing until the rains arrive and we survive. Until I think I'll stop there.
Now, before I take the mic back, I wonder, does anyone have questions for Renee? Thoughts, comments?
They
Yes.
probably have to process all of that.
The first thought is this needs to be an audiobook in your voice.
Yes, I would listen to that audiobook.
Thank you. People do say that. I'll just say about the audiobook. Yeah, I do hope to do that. I don't know how or when. I also want to say, you know, I think sometimes there's this idea that when you hear the poet, you know, you can just enter into the way the poet is delivering for you how the words are. But I really want to encourage you. I've spent 10 years writing this epic. Took me 10 years to get to book one. It's a true epic form, the way Milton or Chaucer or Shakespeare, I mean, I consider him an epic writer, certainly Dante, Virgil. I've put a lot of, hopefully like muse inspired, like not as something that's cranked out because then it wouldn't be any fun to read, but I have put all the skill that I possibly have as a poet onto the page. And as a woman of color writer, I am really truly reclaiming the epic for a heroine who looks even remotely like me. I mean, I'm not dexterous. I don't have long black hair. I used to, you know, I'm not her at all. She's everything I might want to be. But I really encourage people to give the page a chance. So I'm very honored that it should be an audiobook, but I hope people will celebrate the work of the poet on the page. And there was a question back there.
Yeah, I actually wanted to hear the story of coming to write a fantasy epic in particular. How was the relationship with the fantasy as a genre developed? Yeah.
Thank you so much from the fabulous poet who read for us. So this is such a good question. So epic fantasy, again, it's very much all the components you're hearing. If you Google epic fantasy, I certainly didn't, thank goodness, while I was creating this, but it is very humbling. You know, I think Vonnegut said there are no new plots under the sun, like there's 7 plots that just get repeated over and over. Certainly, if you Google epic fantasy, you will find all the elements that are in my epic fantasy in epic fantasy. But if you look traditionally, and there's a lot of literature now, sort of poetics literature on modernist fantasy and how dominated it was by white men and very conservative white men with very conservative values, right? Tolkien, God bless him, but you know, etc. C.S. Lewis. And I love those guys and I pay homage to them, but really? So I'm reclaiming that, hopefully not too deliberately, because then again, it kills the joy, but just me being me in the way I see the world. So what I started to realize, and it is very humbling, as I started to think, what is this thing I'm writing? It's taking me so long. I realized, oh, this is an epic fantasy. And then I started thinking about all the stuff I grew up reading as a kid, Watership Down, Tolkien, etc., etc. And I thought, oh, I really love epic fantasy. And from my South Asian background, the Mahabharata, or from the Greek legends, certainly I grew up in a family that was fascinated with Homer and the Odyssey, et cetera, right? So I think the long form epic and epic fantasy, it occurred to me, these two are meant to go together. And when you go back and you look at particularly Emily Wilson as a feminist writer, American, retranslating an entire iambic pentameter, Homer's epic of the Odyssey, please get that translation. It's fabulous. And it really inspired me for the poetics in my book and even the beautiful book design. And you see that she even talks about this relationship between high fantasy and the epic. So thank you for that question. I could go on, like we can talk after. There was another question I saw. Yes, yes. And thank you for your wonderful poem, by the way. Yes.
Thank you.
And the lanyard.
There you go. What do you think about making up your own words?
Love it.
You do, eh?
But I also think, again, it's what I would say to my students. I do love it. And I think as creators, we can create whatever we want. And correspondingly, because I do believe no right or no right that we can do anything comes without a responsibility. Speaking just personally for me, I want to honor all of you, the reader, the listener. This is greatly debated, particularly in the world that maybe Kurt, who read so fabulously. Where are you, Kurt? Oh, you're such a great poet. It was such an amazing poem. And Will and our friend Larry Bremner, you know, we come from language poetics where I think sometimes the role of the reader is perhaps, I don't know, we'd have to get Kurt up here to discuss with me what is the role of the reader. But I think, you know, sometimes it can be maligned. And the pandemic especially, and I say this in my note to the reader in the back of this book, which I would be very interested to hear your reactions to, I kind of did a full 360 where I realized, actually, I really care about the reader for this series. I want you to have a good time. It's very bleak, it's a dystopia, but I want you to have fun. It's fantasy. I want you to love this, and I hope that your kids will love it and that they will, you know, may it be so that this book will be a classic like other classics if I could be so worthy to create that work. So yeah. Other questions? Thank you. Wonderful audience. Thank you so much. Wonderful shout out to my publisher, Nightwood Editions. If you could, please support and buy the book. Support local bookstores, authors. The beautiful artwork is by Gibson's artist, Nadina Tandy. The book is designed by Gibson's Top Shelf Creative, and it's published by Nightwood Editions and Harbour Publishing. Thank you very much.